In a quiet, picturesque neighborhood nestled between rolling hills and serene lakes, life seemed idyllic. I had always cherished my weekends spent fishing on the shimmering surface of Lake Serenity, a local gem known for its abundant fish and tranquil beauty. However, everything changed when the homeowners association, HOA, decided to take drastic measures to enforce their rules. It all started with a series of complaints from a few residents about the nuisance of fishing. They argued that it disrupted the peace and tranquility of the community. I was shocked when the HOA convened an emergency meeting, announcing a ban on fishing in the lake. I felt betrayed. This was not just a hobby, but a part of my life. Ignoring my protests, the HOA went a step further. They claimed they needed to purify the lake and, without any warning, dumped a toxic substance into the water. The vibrant life of the lake began to fade, and soon, the once lively waters became still and lifeless. I watched in horror as the fish began to die, and the beauty of my beloved lake turned into a desolate wasteland. What I didn't realize, however, was that the HOA's actions would soon come back to haunt them. As the weeks passed, it became evident that the poison had contaminated not only the lake, but also the water supply that fed into the community's homes. Homeowners began to notice strange tastes and odors in their tap water. Panic ensued as families became concerned about their health. In a twist of fate, the very actions taken to eliminate fishing became the catalyst for a community uprising. Residents banded together, demanding answers and accountability from the HOA. It turned out that the water supply for the entire neighborhood depended on the lake, and the poison they had dumped had put everyone at risk. As the truth unfolded, I felt a mix of vindication and sorrow. I had always fought for the lake, not just for my love of fishing, but for the community's well-being. The HOA was forced to face the consequences of their reckless decision, and after a lengthy battle, they were held accountable for the damage done. In the end, the lake was cleaned and restored, and fishing was allowed once more. The community learned a valuable lesson about the importance of preserving nature and the consequences of misguided authority. As I cast my line back into the rejuvenated waters, I felt a renewed sense of hope, not just for myself, but for the entire community that had come together to protect what truly mattered. My name is Ryan, and I own a small property on the edge of a quiet suburban lake. Or at least, it used to be quiet before the HOA decided to make it their mission to control everything I did. When I bought this house, the lake was the selling point. Early mornings, fishing on the dock with coffee in hand, it was peaceful. The kind of peace you can't buy. Until the HOA, led by a woman named Karen Woods, decided that me fishing was unsightly for the community. The start of trouble, it began with a note on my door. Dear resident, the lake is a shared aesthetic feature. Fishing is prohibited for visual harmony. Visual harmony? I thought it was a joke. The lake was half on my land, half public access. I paid property taxes that covered its upkeep. Still, I tried to be civil. I emailed the HOA, explaining that the lake was partially private and I had every right to use it. The response? Fishing creates noise, attracts pests, and disturbs the view. Please comply. Within a week, I got a fine notice for $250. Standing my ground, I went to the next HOA meeting with copies of my property deed, proving that the shoreline and half the lake belonged to me. Karen looked annoyed, like I'd ruined her favorite power trip. That deed doesn't change our community rules, she snapped. Actually, I replied, it changes everything. The room went quiet. I left thinking it was over, but Karen didn't like being challenged. The poison plot a few weeks later, I noticed something strange. The lake water had a chemical smell. The fish, gone. Frogs dead along the bank. Even my dog refused to go near it. I sent a sample to the local environmental office. 2 days later, they called, Mr. Thompson, your lake water tested positive for copper sulfate and pesticides. Someone dumped a massive amount. I was furious. I checked my security cameras and saw a maintenance truck marked HOA groundskeeping parked by the lake around 2 a.m. 3 nights earlier. It was clear. They had poisoned my lake. The investigation, I contacted a lawyer and filed an environmental damage claim. But the HOA doubled down, denying everything. Karen sent me another notice. You're causing unnecessary drama. The HOA has authority to maintain shared areas. Big mistake. When the environmental agency visited, they discovered that the neighborhood's irrigation and water system drew directly from the same lake. The poison they used to teach me a lesson had seeped into the entire HOA's water supply, lawns, sprinklers, fountains, all contaminated. The HOA had essentially poisoned themselves. The fallout, within a week, residents started complaining. Their grass was dying and water pressure was low. Then the state issued a public health advisory. The HOA tried to blame me, but my security footage showed their truck by the lake. The license plate matched. The environmental office confirmed contamination originated from unauthorized HOA chemical dumping. Karen was forced to step down as president. The HOA was fined $180,000 for environmental violation and cleanup. They also had to pay me $75,000 in damages, enough to fully restore the lake and restock it with fish. A year later, today, the lake is clearer than ever. I rebuilt my dock and the fish are back. I fish every morning now, right in front of the no fishing sign that I kept as a souvenir. Karen still lives in the neighborhood, but she avoids eye contact. Every time I cast my line, I see her curtains twitch, and I smile, because sometimes karma flows just like water, slow, steady, and impossible to stop. Moral of the story: don't mess with someone's peace, especially when your own water supply depends on it. My house stood on the edge of Lake Litchfield, a beautiful, privately owned body of water that was the centerpiece of our upscale community. It was the reason I bought the place. I wasn't wealthy, but I was a dedicated, almost religious fisherman. My peace was found on that dock, rod in hand, waiting for the base to bite. This, of course, was a problem for the HOA. Specifically, it was a problem for Beverly. Beverly was the HOA president and a woman who viewed the lake not as a natural ecosystem, but as a decorative water feature for the viewing pleasure of the neighborhood's wealthier non-participants. She hated my fishing. It was messy. It lowered the tone. It definitely ruined the monochromatic landscape aesthetic she was trying to enforce. She had tried everything: fines for unauthorized use of common area, a ban on all fishing boats — I switched to a kayak — and a requirement that all lures be pastel and non-distracting, which I meticulously ignored. Then, one Tuesday, I woke up to a horror show. Dozens of dead fish floated near my dock. Bass, perch, even the tiny sunfish. The water was murky, and a faint chemical smell hung in the air. Someone had dumped a powerful, non-selective aquatic herbicide into the lake. Not just to kill the weeds, but to kill everything. I was heartbroken. I was furious! I called the police, the Department of Natural Resources, DNR, and a private lab. The DNR officer, a weary man named Officer Thompson, took samples. "Looks like copper sulfate or something similar," he mumbled, shaking his head. They hit it hard. "This lake is sterile for a year, maybe more." The HOA sent out an immediate, smug email the next day. "The board has taken proactive measures to clear the lake of invasive, unsightly aquatic growth to ensure the health of the community's water feature. We apologize for the temporary aesthetic inconvenience. It was a declaration of war. They thought they had won. They thought my fishing days were over." The fatal flaw: a week later, Officer Thompson called me back. "Mr. Sharma," he said, his voice unusually strained. "We ran a deeper check on the Litchfield community's infrastructure." "And?" I asked, wiping down my empty tackle box. "And you need to sit down. The original developer of your community cut corners on a huge level. The whole neighborhood isn't on the city water grid like they claim. They are on a private, non-potable well system." "A well? How does that help me?" "Because that non-potable well, the underground aquifer it draws from, is directly fed and recharged by the Lake Litchfield watershed. It's their primary water source for all irrigation, all sprinklers, and the community clubhouse pool." I paused. "Wait, they just dumped a massive dose of copper sulfate into their own irrigation water supply?" "That's exactly right," Thompson confirmed, the ghost of a laugh in his voice. "And we are required to report this to the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, immediately. This is not a fish kill anymore. This is a massive groundwater contamination event." The unforgettable surprise. The next few days were cinematic. It started with the golf course's legendary, perfectly manicured greens. They turned a sickly coppery brown. Then, the private landscaping of Beverly and the other board members began to fail spectacularly. The herbicide in the well water was toxic to the expensive, non-native plants they favored. The biggest disaster hit the community pool. It turned a vivid, terrifying shade of opaque blue-green and had to be drained and acid-washed at enormous cost. Then came the federal authorities, 3 official-looking black SUVs parked in front of the HOA clubhouse. The EPA launched a full-scale investigation into a significant community water quality hazard. They slapped the HOA with